As November lengthens into deep blue afternoons like today, I find myself thinking about the hearth, that ancient centre of warmth and nourishment and companionship. Long before radiators and central heating, the hearth was where life gathered. It was where stories were told and where work was done, where the day began and where it ended, and where something of the sacred settled into the ordinary glow of flame and embers. Hello and welcome to Wednesday Wandering with me, Cate Field. Wondering about things creative and spiritual and quietly fascinating, and not just wandering off. If you are new here, a very warm welcome to you. I share art tutorials every Monday and Friday, and this little gentle wandering each Wednesday. A few moments to pause, to reflect, and perhaps see how art and faith and the creative life help us to make sense of this sometimes crazy world. In these colder weeks that we're experiencing here in southwest England, when the year naturally folds inwards, the hearth becomes both a symbol of physical and symbolic invitation to reflect on what sustains us. And that brings me, first of all, to St Margaret of Scotland, whose feast day falls on the 16th of November. Margaret lived in the late 11th century, a world of shifting alliances, raw political tensions and frequent uncertainty. Scotland at that time could be a turbulent place, full of unrest and the rough edges of medieval power, and let's not talk about the English. Into this world came a queen whose strength lay not in military strategy or spectacle, but in quiet artistry of order. And we know her through Turgot, the Bishop of St Andrews, who wrote a tender biography after her death. And he describes her rising before dawn by candlelight to read the Psalms. And he describes her care for the poor, her hospitality, and her gentle scholarship. She nurtured this in the children. But what strikes me most is his depiction of her domestic creativity, the way that she transformed her household into a place of rhythm and beauty and of peace. So imagine this. Outside the palace, the clash of hooves, the urgency of messengers, the gust of wind rattling the shutters, the noise, the unpredictability of political life. Inside, under Margaret's hand, a table laid with care, linen folded with intention, the soft glow of a candle before the morning prayers. Perhaps bread set out for the poor before she herself would eat. A place where children learned their letters in a space of quiet confidence and support. Turgot tells us that Margaret's home became both palace and monastery, a meeting place of rule and ritual. Her routines were not rigid, they were enlivening. Her rhythms were not constraints, they were creative acts. This kind of really does resonate with me, so I've got to get comfy. In a sense, her artistry was in her attention. She ensured order in the smallest of things because order nourishes. She created beauty in the everyday because beauty steadies the heart. Her life teaches that creative holiness emerges not from the grand gesture, but from the daily patient shaping of a lovely, peaceful environment. Margaret's hearth was her centre of meaning, the place where care and order and faith met. And this leads me to another woman whose hearth took a very different form. So if Margaret's creative space was her table, May Morris's was her needle and thread. May Morris was the daughter of the famous designer William Morris. And May was a formidable artist in her own right, and she became a pivotal figure in the arts and craft movement and was largely responsible for reviving the traditions of English embroidery. But unlike her father, whose designs often captured attention through those bold patterns and sweeping, May Morris's hearth was the repetition of the needle, the movement that binds one moment to the next, one idea to the next, one life to a lineage of makers. And she reminds us that what is created through patience often outlasts what is created through speed, and that the quiet daily tending of craft is itself a sustaining fire. I just love this idea so much that we need to slow down. I'd like now to wonder about Winifred Nicholson, who understood the hearth not as fire, but as light. While many of Winifred Nicholson's contemporaries sought grandeur of drama, Nicholson turned her attention to the simplest of subjects, a vase of flowers placed on a windowsill. For her, this wasn't mere still life painting, it was devotional. Nicholson found holiness in the domestic. She would take a teacup, a few daffodils, and a sunlit windowsill, and turned that modest corner of her home into an altar for light. The window for her was a threshold where inner and outer worlds met, a place where the natural world poured gently into the domestic, illuminating not just objects, but the whole mood of a room. She wrote, "I paint flowers because they are a kind of light. They rest and renew the spirit." How beautiful is that? Winifred Nicholson's paintings hold that quiet truth, her soft blues, the tender yellows, the pale greens, all whispering comfort rather than insisting on attention. And you can almost feel the hush of early morning, the pause of a kettle boiling, the first breath of a slow day. Nicholson's art invites us to believe that the divine is not confined to the monumental. It resides in the small repeated acts of noticing beauty right where we are, with whatever we have. Her windowsill is the intimate companion to Margaret's table and May Morris's embroidery frame, another hearth, another focus of domestic creativity. Taken together, these three women reveal a profound truth, I think, that the hearth is not merely a place, it's a practice. It is formed wherever attention, beauty, and care meet. For St Margaret, it was the sacred routine of prayer, nourishment, and order. For May Morris, it was the steady kindness of the needle, the belief that labour done well is a kind of love. And for Winifred Nicholson, it was an act of lifting beauty out of the ordinary and placing it gently into the light. And for each of us, the hearth becomes a kind of inner space where creativity is rekindled. A fire that must be tended through rhythm and patience and the willingness to notice. I have a little creative invitation for you for this week. So as we move deeper into November here in the Northern Hemisphere, or in the spring if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you might want to just think about what feeds your own hearth, what small rituals bring warmth to your inner life. You could light a candle before you begin your work, perhaps, or maybe arrange some beautiful flowers or a simple object on your desk as a place of focus. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, think about the spring and the blossom going into summer. And here, as we are going from autumn to winter, think about how that whole nature around us can influence our own creative practice. Just have 10 minutes of unhurried making where the point is presence rather than perfection. The hearth reminds us that creativity thrives on steadiness and care. And may your creativity burn gently this week, lightening the path towards Advent's quiet glow. Next Wednesday we turn to St Cecilia and St Catherine as November draws towards its close. Take care. Bye-bye.